All right, well, good afternoon, and thank you again to our wonderful panelists for being willing to share your lived experience with us today. Because these journeys help us better understand their experiences and also will help us to know how to navigate some of this as we encounter it in our communities. So what we'll do is each of them is going to share a little bit about themselves, and then I do have some questions that we'll ask the panel, and then we'll open it up at the end for any Q&A from the audience, okay? If you're like me and a question comes to your mind as they're chatting, just write it down, and I promise we'll get time for that. So Allison, let's start with you.
Can you hear me? There we go. I have the hot potato, so I guess I have to start. So my name's Allison Dayton. I grew up in Salt Lake. I'm a generational member of the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I grew up with a faithful family and a brother who was gay. He came out in 1973 to my parents. My mom said she hardly knew what being gay was. He didn't come out into the world until after his mission. And after his mission, he realized he wasn't going to change. And shortly after that, had himself excommunicated from the church. And I don't know where Chad is. Where is Chad? Oh my gosh, your exile and return was really, like, it gave words to something that I've been really thinking about. He had himself exiled from the church. But the problem is that he was still in a relationship with the church. And he was angry and hurt. And he did his best to have a great life, but the anger sort of overwhelmed him. There was a policy that came through the church that really angered him. And he sat me aside one day and said that I had to choose between him and the church. And wow, what a choice. And I didn't have the right words. I didn't have the maturity to talk to him about this in ways that I could now. And I didn't see the pain. About a year and a half later, my brother took his life. I never got to talk to him again. His last letter to us talked about not fitting in, not being part of our family, of the church. He mentioned that doors didn't open that he thought would open, and kind of a last-ditch effort to claim himself as a beloved child of God. And I realized in that moment that he felt divorced from this, like, DNA deep religion that's part of our generations, like our families that came across the plains. And he never recovered from it. At the same time I'm grieving this loss, I have a son who's 17, and I know he's gay. He hasn't told me yet, but I know. So as I'm trying to figure out how to go through this suicide with this son and how to help him through it kind of proactively, so hard. But there was so much learning there. So after my son came to us and came out, I had his friends over from BYU. They were all up. They came up for the Pride Festival. None of them had ever been before. And there were about 6 kids, and none of them were supported by their families. And I just had this really strong feeling, you've got to do something. So I started a little Instagram account called Lift and Love, and I thought, well, I'll just put some messages out there. I have an advertising degree from Brigham Young University. I'll just put some messages of hope and love out there. And then the moms started calling me and DMing me and needing help. And I thought, okay, my brother was after his mission, after my parents realized, and I'll just say they made a lot of mistakes. They thought, in the 70s, they thought they could cure him, shock it out of him, pray it out of him, all the things, and they tried them all. But after my parents became completely loving, and his boyfriend would come on our vacations, and we would buy him gifts like another uncle. So I thought, here, I can help these parents, these mothers, support their kids. That's what I'm going to do. Because my mom was such a great example of staying firm in her faith and helping. But then I quickly realized about 6 months later, I wasn't doing any of that work. All the work I was doing was faith crisis work with these moms. Because all of a sudden, this child who they love and are protecting is at odds with their beliefs. And interestingly enough, I have Catholic moms and moms of all Christian denominations that jump in because they feel like they aren't supported in their own system. But the problem is that they are now at odds, like my brother was. How do I fit? Where do we fit? There's this disconnection, and this place that was always like this grounding place that fed them. All of a sudden, they're disconnected from it. They don't fit. And a lot of times people won't talk to them about it or say things that are harsh. So the research shows in my brother's year, he was a boomer, that someone would come out at 26 in kind of the younger than me, kids would come out at 22. But millennials were the first to come out at 6, and they're coming out at an average of 16 years old. And here is the major difference between what's happening now and what happened then, is that they're coming out, they are the first generation to come out when they're still living with their parents. And their moms are really protective and loving and supportive. So this is where our work is to help people stay connected, to not have to exile family, not have to exile the child, and not have to exile their faith. Because I'll tell you, both of those, there's no happiness in either of those unless people are able to do this of their own volition. And this work that I've done it's taken me, I was just explaining, it's taken me in the most, the things I thought I would be doing, I'm not. But I feel, in fact, where's Deborah Coe? She asked me she was the first mama I ever talked to about how do you get through this? And she said, do you want to be on the Suicide Coalition group? And I was like, yeah, I do. And then I just knew in the minute, that's not where I was supposed to be. So I said no to her 5 years ago. And then I just not too long, a year ago, started with the LGBTQ work group and here. And I think this is an important place because of the religious makeup of Utah. Not only the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but the Christian faiths, the Catholic Church. Our faith is strong here. We're about families. And I know we have probably all heard the study that says that faith can be protective. But it's protective because it creates community. It creates a reason why I'm here. There's this idea that I'm here because of I have a purpose. And then there's this glorious afterlife. But the problem is with our LGBTQ kids, it breaks those very those cables. So now we don't belong. We can't figure out what we're doing. And the afterlife either doesn't look so great, or it looks so great, I better hurry there. And both of those are really tragic. So we work with moms to protect their children because that's what they're doing. And I'll tell you, I have never met such protective moms. And it's a conflict with their religion, no matter what their faith is. Because now you're pitted against, you've got this child you're trying to protect and this religion that you love. And I'm telling you, that fight with the religion, we're losing these families and the moms will take the whole family. And that's it. That's done. So this is where I come in. It's this experience of my brothers that put me on this course. It's a strange course, but it is one of the most sacred experiences I have ever had by a long shot. Knowing the stories, being with people, too many have lost their children. But being able to hold them, and they hold me in this situation, has been really a blessing, and I am so grateful for it. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. Next, we'll hear from Kevin.
I'm Kevin Barble. Can you play with me for just a moment? Anyone that has been 14, please stand up. So everyone should be standing in the room, as I can tell. I want you to think back to that age, 14 years old. Go to that little boy, that little girl. If you need to close your eyes and think for just a moment, I want you to think back to that part of your life. What is one thing that you wanted more than anything else? Think for just a moment, what is that one thing you wanted? And perhaps you did not tell anyone else what you wanted. Maybe you did tell God you wanted this one thing. When you have that thought in your mind, go ahead and have a seat. At 14, I wanted health. I wanted good health. I grew up with a father that struggled quite a bit. He had his first heart attack at 35, a lot of issues. So I never told anyone ever that I wanted a strong body, a healthy mind. So when I was 14, in the LDS community, there is what is called a patriarchal blessing. It's a blessing you receive for guidance and promises. And in that blessing, I was told I'd be blessed with health and strength. I would come across the ordinary illnesses, but I would have a speedily recovery. And in that moment, I was like, okay, God's listening to me. God knows me personally. And I was overjoyed. I was excited. Fast forward a few years, I found myself in a situation of a major back injury. And I started questioning, does God really know me? Was that blessing true? Was the person that put their hands on my head, were they inspired? Oh, I know. God's cursing me. I must have done something bad in my early 20s, or before then, that God was going to curse me for the rest of my life with this back issue. So I spent the next several months in bed, scared, frustrated, depressed, suicidal ideation, wondering, what have I done wrong? Things started to progressively get better. I was able to get back to health. And then fast forward about several years, and I found myself in 2019, my health took a turn for the worse. Pain like you couldn't even imagine. I could barely walk, barely get out of bed. And once again, that cycle of depression, suicide ideation. Is there a God? Does God love me, if there is a God? In that moment, I didn't feel I could trust leaders. There were several things that happened in my life that, with these leaders that I had in religion, that were not ideal. One's in prison for life. And so I started questioning myself, like, why? Why me? Why? You told me at 14 years old, God, that I would have good health. I'd have a strong body, healthy mind. Why? Got to a point I couldn't provide for my family, couldn't work, I was laid up in bed. In 2021, I went through my first back surgery. A few months later, that surgery failed. So in April of 2022, my wife and I went to Germany to have surgery over there. Got back, things looked good. I was like, all right, great. But then life took a turn. I got really depressed. Really depressed. And I kept telling myself, if I'm going to be in this much pain, what's the point? I have 4 beautiful kids, beautiful wife that's over here. But if I cannot provide for them, why stay here? The summer of 2023, I took a very long drive with no intention to return. I got to that destination and I sat there for hours. And I thought of other people who had committed suicide, and in that moment I was like, good for them. I made that sound harsh, but I'm like, they were able to follow through. They're out of pain. So I found myself in the zone. It didn't matter what was going on. I was there. Sitting in my truck, and all of a sudden there's a noise. Hitting my windshield over and over. It's like, dang it, what is that? And I look up and it's a dragonfly. As it kept hitting the window, I knew I had a message. And I felt like I had just got done running a marathon, and I've never ran one before. But I was so tired. I lay down in my truck. I went to sleep for hours. And as I sat there and thought about the dragonfly, I couldn't help but think about my friend, that a few years prior, he opted out. He chose out. There was an event that he was supposed to be at, and the room was packed all but one chair. And what came in the room? A dragonfly. That dragonfly went over and sat on that chair and stayed there. And as I thought about Spencer, I was like, dang it, dude, you were able to do it. Why won't you let me? I'm still here. Doesn't mean that I'm pain-free. I've been in pain every single day for 3 years, almost 4 years now. People say you look healthy. I'm like, looks can be deceiving. You never know what's going on the inside. When my pain is high, my mental capacity is low. So now I can recognize that. And when my pain is up, I really rely more on God, like, please help. You kept me here. I don't know why, but I'm here. I want to thank Heidi for allowing me to be here today. This is the first time I've actually shared it in a large group. The struggle is real. You have no idea what people are going through. The struggle is real.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Next, we'll hear from Cher.
Hi. Thank you for both of what you shared. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a crier. I threaten all the time at work to go have surgery to have my tear ducts removed. because I can't keep it under control. I grew up in Rexburg, Idaho. I was born and raised also in the LDS Church. My roots go way back. As a woman growing up in my family, we were told all the time about Drusilla Hendricks. What an amazing person she was in early church history, who came over with the saints. A woman of great strength. Her husband was maimed by the mobs. She lost children. And we were always told, you come from a long line of strong women. You are strong women. And we all were told that, all my cousins. And I was the oldest. My brother's here with me today. I'm so grateful to have him here for support. He was the oldest grandson, I was the oldest granddaughter. And I did a lot of firsts in our family that had never been done before. And then suddenly I was put here on a pedestal, and I felt a lot of expectation within me because of that were being placed upon me. I was the first to go to college. I was the first to serve an LDS mission. I was the first grandchild to get married in the temple. A lot of firsts. And I was put on a pedestal. I was raised by my wonderful mother, the most amazing woman I have ever had the pleasure of knowing, who has passed from cancer, and my also very amazing stepfather. And my mom had divorced my biological father when I was 3 and remarried my stepfather, who I consider my father, when I was 5. My biological father chose to not really have anything to do with this. And in my little 3-year-old heart, I could not conceive that if my own father wanted nothing to do with me, anybody else could find me lovable. And so I held within me a deep hole in my heart. I don't remember most of my life feeling happiness or joy. And as a teenager, I longed so for that feeling of love, that connectedness, that belonging, feeling accepted, that when I was approached with alcohol, I gave into that because I wanted to be loved, accepted, feel connected. And the first time I drank, for the first time that I can remember in my life, I felt okay inside me. And that started a whole chain of events for me in my life. Since that time, I've struggled a lot with alcoholism in my life. And I've gone through periods of sobriety and relapse, and sobriety and relapse. And because of how I was taught and the beliefs I held and the things I had literally taught my children and taught people on my mission, I felt very shameful. I felt like I was disgracing my family, my religion, my community. The community I grew up in, my mom was very well known and very well respected. She was voted Woman of the Year one year. and I went to see her get her award. Nobody had any idea the life I was living, the life of disgrace that I was hiding. And I compartmentalized my life. There was church me here. There was alcoholic me here. And I kept them very separate. But I was dying inside. It was killing me. And the depression that came and grew and continued to grow became more than I knew how to handle. I was also in a very bad marriage and trying to get out of that, where by the time I got out, I had no self-esteem or self-confidence. I was scared of my own shadow. I was working for the LDS Church. I'd been put on probation at my work because they found out that I was drinking. And then I started a series of several attempts and several hospitalizations because I could not see that there was any way out of the pain and the disgrace I was feeling. The last attempt, I should not have lived through. For whatever reason, I had sent a message to Heidi, who is a friend of mine here. I had called in sick to work, depressed. I had an entire fifth of whiskey and a bottle of Ambien that I had filled the day before. As I am typing out my message to Heidi, I took the Ambien and drank all of what was left in that bottle that I had been drinking that day. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. Thankfully, Heidi recognized I was in a bad place. Called the ambulance, got them to my home. I do not remember this part, but it was relayed to me at some point later that my youngest son, who was in elementary school, he rode a bus and it would drop him off around the corner. And then he'd walk down to our house. He came around the corner just in time to see them loading me into the ambulance, not knowing what was happening. That was a wake-up call for me. My children were furious. I don't blame them. But in that instant, I knew I did not want to live that way anymore. And I set on a journey, and I made the decision that in spite of all the well-meaning people in my life who tried to tell me how to make things better, I had to find my own journey and my own way. And it took me a long time. It wasn't an overnight thing. It was trial and error and figuring things out. But I am grateful to the people who allowed me the space to do those things, because it was different than what some of them would have chosen for me or would have advised me to do. But they allowed me my space to go through my healing journey on my terms, to understand what works for me. There were some that tried to hold me back in a negative space. I had to distance myself from them because they didn't allow for my growth. So So I am so eternally grateful that I did not succeed that day, because I am here to tell you I have never been happier in my life. I love my life now. I love where I'm at. And I would have missed all of that. And what a tragedy. And that's why I chose to be here, is because I just want others to recognize that there is hope for everybody. And if you're somebody that's helping somebody that is without hope, just create that living space for them without expectation as they navigate through their own healing journey. Thanks.
Wow. Do you see why we picked these folks? Give them a hand. That was very vulnerable and brave. I think, Chad, you'd agree they navigated through conflict well and did come out the other side. So I have just a couple of questions I'm going to ask, and then as I mentioned, we'll open it up to the group. So I'm going to ask this first one to Allison. Allison, would you maybe share with us, is there ways that your faith leader or maybe folks in your congregation supported you and helped you during this? And if so, what was it that they did that was helpful?
I think simply they acknowledged, and they actually, my brother lived in San Francisco, and we had a kind of a celebration of his life at my house, and they came, and they didn't have to judge, or they didn't have to even agree with him, but they came, and I think some people feel invisible in our churches for whatever reason, even if we don't know that they do. And just acknowledging, loving, asking, like, how are you doing without Preston? No judgment. But really, I was in a really supportive space at that time, and just acknowledging. We're so scared. We're so scared to talk about this, to talk about a lot of different things. And I think that fear makes for very lonely spaces. And, I think as the Surgeon General, Vivek I can't remember his last name, Murphy, said, we are in a crisis of loneliness. I'll just add that the one thing people always say when they find Lift and Love is, I'm not alone. Yeah. I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one.
Thank you. And I would just like to, maybe touch on what you said in that feeling of aloneness. I'm sure each of you up here, and how many of you, maybe if you're brave enough, as these folks shared their stories, could you relate with some part of their story, right? And I see heads nodding, and I think that's the thing that we forget, because in those moments we do feel so alone. So let's touch on that, Kevin. I'm going to ask this one of you. Were there things that others maybe said or did that maybe caused you to have more isolation, or maybe made you feel more alone?
It's a great question. A lot of my suffering was in silence. But at the same time, when people would say from the podium, live righteous, pray more, fast, all those kind of things were things that would trigger me inside, like, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, but my pain isn't going away. My depression isn't going away. So those kind of things were the triggers would push me further away. It's like, you don't understand, I'm suffering. And those small things that I understand now they had good intention of what they were saying, but had the inward demons working on me. Like, you're bad, you're cursed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And this is for you, Cher. First of all, thank you for sharing your experience with recovery as a fellow alcoholic. I see you. I'd like to know maybe how the stigma that still surrounds substance use disorder and alcoholism. Alcohol is one of the chemicals that's, widely used and accepted in our society. But maybe talk to us a little bit about how the stigma around that still affected your efforts to get and find some recovery. You had mentioned shame as being part of that, but maybe talk to us about the stigma and what you see is how we can maybe start to address that better in our community.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to do that. It's interesting because I actually, now I work at a substance abuse treatment facility in Tooele, Utah, where I live. And we actually just, in our group discussion the other night, talked about stigma. It's a biggie. And I, maybe to put in perspective a little, I had a conversation with my mother one time prior to her passing. And I had been feeling very judged by certain people in my life and within my church and things. And my mom said to me, "We all sin. They can just smell yours better." And I love that. And it's true. Sometimes when we attach a certain meaning or a stigma to a sin, it doesn't create a place of safety for that person who is struggling with that, to be able to reach out for support, to be able to be honest with their church leaders about their suffering and what they could use to be supported. And I think that is not just true within religion, it's true in our society overall. The stigma with addiction and substance abuse is still there, and it's unfortunate because truly those people who have gone through that and overcome it are some of the most amazing, strong people that do things in life, and the people you want in your corner. So.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Allison, I'll have you hot potato it back to Allison. I have a question for you. I wonder if you could share with us just your thoughts and perspective, especially, amongst faith leaders, is how can we better support our LGBTQ community? Maybe what advice would you have? Because there are it's hot topics these days, right? And there is so much division as it comes to this. What advice or suggestions would you offer this group?
First, I would say it's time to start talking about it. So the average, last Gallup polls came in at 7.6% of Americans identify somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. And for millennials and Gen Z, it's in the 22%. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all going to be marrying someone of the same sex or whatnot, but they do have a broader range than we did. I always say we had 8 crayons in our crayon box, and they have 64 and a sharpener. Yeah. So they get to color themselves much differently than we are. And curiosity helps. Ask, talk to them, find out. But it's time to start talking about it. It's time to keep them connected to their Savior, to their God, to their higher power, to something, to what they were raised to believe. And that, like I said with my brother, that divorcement, which is what happens when you're no longer a child of God, right? That really ruined him. And he spent his whole life looking for that, looking for something that would fill that unfillable space. So talk about it. Let these kids know they're loved. Let them know that they are, that God loves them, that God wants to be in communication, wants to guide them, wants to be there, and that they're still beloved.
Thank you. And you really should follow her Instagram. She has great content. So Kevin, you mentioned your struggles with chronic pain, and as someone else who's had multiple back surgeries, I feel you. Anyone other chronic painers in the room? Come on, this is hard, right? And it does. It wears on our psyche. It wears on our mind. And so I wonder, how have you maybe utilized your faith leader to? Is this somebody you've been able to open up to, and what could your faith leader maybe have done to better support you during that really difficult time for you and your family?
That's a great question. And for the majority of my journey, I didn't turn to a faith leader. I didn't have that trust. I pulled back. But thinking about it, it was just a few months ago, a friend is now one of my leaders. And I realized that friend was a friend before he was a leader. And that made all the difference. I can talk to a friend about what I was dealing with mentally, physically, and emotionally, where I struggled because of the title, the position, whatever, as a leader, I struggled connecting with that leader. So the advice would be is be the friend. Really, that's it, is be the friend, connect with them, be concerned about them and their life, and not just about if they are coming to church or if they're not, or doing X, Y, and Z. Just check on them, check in on them. Give them the hug if they're a hugger, right? And it's just not like, hey, how are you doing? But no, like, really, how are you doing? There's a difference I found when this friend would ask me, how are you doing? Compared to, how are you doing? That's what I recommend. Be a friend.
I love it. And after back surgery, we actually don't want hugs.
Yeah. Until we feel better.
Until
and then
we feel
do.
better.
I'm a hugger too, so yes.
I love it. I'm going to ask this one of Cher. Is there anything you feel like your faith leaders could have maybe known, or things that would have been more helpful for them to know as it relates to your struggles with alcoholism that could have been helpful?
That's a hard one.
I know, I'm making you think.
You are. I had some really great leaders. I did, that I am very appreciative. And if I look at the difference between those leaders and some that maybe I didn't find to be as great, I think the difference is that they saw my heart. They loved me as a person above anything else. And they were able to separate my worthiness from my worth and help me to do the same.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We always say in the rooms of recovery, we're not bad people trying to get good. We are sick people trying to get well, and we need all the help we can get. So thank you for that. And I would just invite, for folks that do, want to learn more about substance use, attend meetings. We meet in your church basement sometimes anonymously. We'd love to have you come join and just learn. I always said that the rooms of recovery are like testimony meeting, but truth. All right, so this is the final question I'm going to ask, and just allow each of you to share. And then we'll open it up to you folks. But I'd like you to share with us, what made the most significant difference, whether it was from within you or from outside of you, that really strengthened your faith and hope as you were going through the struggles you were. And we can even go this way back if you want, unless you want a break.
For me, and I would like to be very clear before I say this, I love my time in the LDS Church, my life in the LDS Church. It is a part of who I am and makes me what I am today. But for me, I chose to step away from the church. And when I did, I recognized that now it was me and God. I was out of work. I had been out of work for over a year with some very significant health issues. I had tapped out all my leave, all my emergency funds. The church was helping me financially. It was a terrifying move for me when I finally left. For the first time in my life, I turned to God fully and 100% and had to develop a relationship with Him. My faith has never been stronger than it is now. Because I have finally a personal relationship with God. And I'm not saying that is what's right for everybody, but that is what has been right for me in my life.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo on that in the sense of having a relationship with God. Through all those years, I attended church. I did the things, right? But it wasn't until a few months ago I realized me and him, we need something. I need to build that relationship and be open. And as things have opened up in the last several months, I've been guided to amazing therapists that are licensed to do terrific techniques I had no idea that were on the planet, that helped me work through my brain. I was able to go to body workers and work on my body, and that has been phenomenal. And I really feel that finally, because I'm open, that God is directing me to where I need to go. And it's that relationship with God that has allowed me to heal and experience the true power of healing.
I'm going to be so boring, but I will echo what they said. In the darkest moments when I was the most frustrated, dealing with this relationship with my brother and losing him, I had to go to God. There's so much cultural. In our religions, we pile culture on history and on true doctrine, and you can get mired in that so easily. But I found that, like, being connected so closely with God was the beauty in the ashes, and sadly, you can't get there without the ashes. And it is that alone, and that they both talked about, that only just me and God. And that's where I go when I'm angry. That's where I go when I've had too many stories that are painful in our religion, that have hurt too many people. I go to God every single time. That's where the pain can go, and that's where the healing comes. And I am really grateful. I'm grateful for the experience.
I love it. All right, we do have a question online we're going to take first, and then we only have a couple minutes, but if there's one or two in the audience, we'll take. Good friend Holly.
Okay, this is from self-identified LGBTQIA mom. And she said, for those of our children who have left our faiths, how do we strike a balance as we continue to keep ours, our religions, and honor their choice with love and respect?
I think that's an Allison question.
You know what? I think it's an everyone question. I don't know many
Yeah.
people whose children are staying in, like, that have all their children in their faith like we used to do, right? although I watched Fiddler on the Roof, and there we are all those years ago in the same experience. I think it gets back to peaceful conflict. We're so used to speaking in our language and in our faith tradition and all of that we don't even realize it. And we need to open that up and remember, I mean, our families, the most important thing is that you're connected, because then you can be, you can tether them to God in a way that they may not be tethered by themselves, and you can kind of support that while not saying it all the time. But I think we need to open up our conversations, think of better ways to have conversations. I mean, you have to be kind of implicit about it, like, hey, what things should be off the table at our family dinner? What things hurt? You know, and it goes both ways. Yeah. Like, let's be respectful for my religion, and I'll be respectful for your pain. It's the thing I wasn't able to do with my brother. But I think it takes a new skill, but isn't that what we're all learning right now with the conflict in our political structure, and we're losing family members over politics. Mm-hmm. Like, we should be getting really good skills at this, really good tools of just, hey, it's important that we sit down at the table together. What does that look like to you? This is what it looks like to me. I think it's talking through it.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely no shortage of an opportunity to practice what we learned today, is there? Maybe just one question in the audience. Anyone have a burning desire or something you'd really love to know? I'll slowly run at you. Okay. Well, then join me in giving them a round of applause. And I'm willing to bet they would be open to chatting with you after, and just take good care of you, because what each of you did is be vulnerable with us, and please honor that and do something nice for you. And I'll just share one last thought I have, because as you were talking, you know, the thing I've learned in my spiritual journey is God shows up to me through you, and I call it God in skin. Because I don't get to see that being every day, but I get to see it in my fellow human, and I got to see it today. So thank you for being my God in skin today. Thanks again for that. Wonderful job.